it caused me psychological trauma every time it happened. I just died inside of me, you know.
4-year-old girl raped by her nanny's husband. Man arrested for raping, sodomizing and assaulting sister-in-law. Security guard sentenced to death for rape and murder of student. These are real headlines just within this past few months that shows the ever-present issue of violence against women and children in Malaysia. In this special 2-part episode of The Society with me, Farhana, we will discuss the prevalence of violence against women and children in Malaysia. We will hear from activists, organizations, and most importantly, survivors themselves on the root causes of these acts of violence. Now we can eliminate them. Violence against women is a major public health concern. Worldwide, 1 in 3 women have experienced physical and/or sexual violence. The United Nations defines violence against women as any act of gender-based violence that results in physical, sexual, mental harm or suffering to women. This includes threats, coercion, deprivation of liberty, all occurring in public or in private life. And this violence against women comes in many forms.
Violence against women is actually a chosen action, and I want to emphasize chosen. It's not random, it's not out of the blue. You know, you're planning it and you're doing it, and usually it's a man, unfortunately, against a woman. It can be physical violence, like domestic violence. It could be psychological violence. It could be sexual violence, as in rape, but of course it also happens in domestic violence situations, and it's economic violence too, where you withdraw money, where you do not give her enough money. But the root cause of that violence, the root objective, the main objective is to control the woman. Control your wife, control your daughter, control your sister, control your girlfriend.
From 2013 to 2017, over 25,000 cases of domestic violence were reported to the Royal Malaysia Police. Close to 10,000 cases of rape, 1,500 cases of incest, and more than 100,000 cases of sexual harassment. From 2013 to May 2018, the Ministry of Women, Family and Community Development reported over 50,000 cases of rape, incest, molestation, unnatural sex acts, sexual harassment, and domestic violence. But these numbers are far from the reality.
You know, for every 1 rape, they say 9 go unreported, because there's a huge shame about reporting rape, because most of the time, the rape is 97% of the time is the rape by someone you know, somebody intimate. It could be your boyfriend, it could be somebody you are dating, and it can also be a husband, or it could be a member of the family. So it's very difficult to report. So I would say easily like 1 out of 10 people have experienced some form of violence in this country.
I met him at in a home in the same neighborhood where I was staying. And he then invited me to go out for dinner, and from there we dated for about 3 years, and before getting married. During the 3 years that I dated him, there was no sign at all of any abuse or possible abuse, because he's a nice person. He treated me well, he was respectful of me. After my child was born, and my mother-in-law came to stay with us because we were working in KL, and she had been looking after our son in Ipoh. And then when we got a house, we invited my mother-in-law over to bring our son over and to look after our son. But the problem arose when she started taking control of the affairs of our family affairs, including the upbringing of our son. And my husband pandered to her requests, and then he started being very critical of me in whatever I did, especially in my cooking, comparing my cooking with his mother's cooking, and then also arguments most of the time. And then one day my father-in-law came over to stay with us, and he consumed alcohol at home in the evenings, and he started talking nonsensical things to me. It just got unbearable, and I just spoke up, against my father-in-law. And then I went to bed. That's when my husband came and slapped me for speaking up.
Because they know when they beat their wives or their daughters or even rape their wives, they know that they can get away with it because in their minds, she'll remain faithful, she'll remain loyal to you, right? And that's what's happened for many, many years. And even till now, women are afraid to come out and say that their husbands are beating them, afraid to say that their boyfriend that they've known for some years have raped them, because it's like somehow it becomes, this is my fault, right? Why did I choose a bad man? I always say this to women, it's never your fault. It's a chosen action by your boyfriend, a chosen action by your husband, because he believes that he's got the power. In all my 40 years of working on domestic violence, they do not change if they do not admit they have a problem. A lot of them believe, she's my wife. She's my wife. I have a right to discipline her.
Because I'd also endured years of emotional abuse from him, so I then decided to end the marriage. That's when I was raped repeatedly. So every night when he returned home from work, he would come to where I was sleeping at that time. Because after he had hit me, I had moved out from the master bedroom to sleep on the sofa in the living area to distance myself from him. So the rape happened on the sofa in my living area, where it would happen when he comes back home from work, and because the living area is dark at night, and he just comes over me and without seeking my consent. And I couldn't fight him off. I couldn't physically fight him off, and I just wished that the ground would just swallow me up there and then. And then once he was satisfied, I would just wrench myself away from him and curl up on the sofa and sob silently with pain. So this happened repeatedly, and I was so distraught that I tried to run away. I went one weekend to stay with my parents, but he turned up at my parents' home, and I had to return home with him because otherwise he would have caused a commotion in the neighborhood, and I didn't want him to distress my family further. And a few weeks later, I tried another escape. I stayed overnight at my colleague's home, and the next day he turned up at the office. So again, to avert a nasty scene, I had to assure him that I would return home. So that's when I realized that there was just no way for me to leave home. I just had to stay home and endure it. And I just wished for the days to go by quickly, for my divorce to come true. Rape is rape, regardless of whether it's happened, it's done to you by a stranger or by your boyfriend or by your husband. Rape is rape.
For survivors of domestic violence, the Women's Aid Organization has been a pioneer in helping women across Malaysia to end violence against women and promote gender equality in Malaysia.
And we provide free services for survivors of domestic violence as well as sexual assault and other forms of gender-based violence. The services that we provide includes shelter, social work and counselling. And we also have a hotline, and women can contact us through our hotline, as well as an SMS and WhatsApp line called Tina. So if a woman is trying to leave an abusive situation, she often needs a safe place to go to. So she can come to our shelter together with her children, and at the shelter we provide everything free of charge. And at the shelter we also have social workers who assist women throughout the entire case. This can include assisting them to make police reports, to go to the hospitals, as well as to go through the entire court process. There's three main routes that you can take to get support in a case of domestic violence or sexual assault. So the first option you have would be to go to the police station and to make a police report. And while making the police report, if it's a case of domestic violence, you can request for an interim protection order. So when you make the report, tell the police officer that you want an interim protection order, also known as an IPO. So that's one of your options. The second option for domestic violence cases would be to go to the Social Welfare Department or the Jabatan Kebajikan Masyarakat and to apply for an emergency protection order, also known as an EPO. The third option, especially if there are injuries, would be to go straight to the one-stop crisis center located at the emergency department of major government hospitals. So go to the one-stop crisis center, which is also known as the OSCC. At the one-stop crisis center, you can make a police report and you can also get medical treatment for whatever injuries you face. And the medical examination reports can also be used in court if you would like to take the case.
In ensuring justice for survivors of violence against women, Malaysia is first signatory to the 1979 Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which recognizes violence as a part of discrimination against women. Malaysia is also amongst the first ASEAN country to adopt the Domestic Violence Act that protects women, men, and children affected by domestic violence. Under the Penal Code, rape is also punishable with up to 20 years in prison and whipping. The law also specifies 11 different scenarios where the punishment for rape can be extended up to 30 years in prison. While these laws to a certain extent criminalizes violence against women, are laws enough?
A lot of laws are in place to say that we are protected, that we are equal. That's the most important word, that we are equal. But at the end of the day, laws are never enough. You may have a law against domestic violence, against rape, about inheritance, about guardianship, all of that. You may have all those laws. The culture of the law, that means if your thinking doesn't change, if the policeman says, "Hey, balik rumah, go back, this is a private matter," if they don't investigate properly, when we hear that somebody has been beaten, a wife has been beaten, or a girl has been raped, we normalize it. You know, our skins become thick. But what happens is that we accept it rather than challenge it. So then we, as a society, tend to allow for discrimination against women as if it's biasa. If you see a robber going into your neighbor's house, you'll call the police. But if you hear a woman crying and saying, don't beat me, stop beating me, you know, and the children crying, we just say, oh, it's a family matter. So I think society becomes very, they don't care and they think it's biasa and it's a family affair, it's a private matter, right? If, in your workplace, they feel that as a woman, I'm not going to give you a high position or you're going to get pregnant anyway, right? So even though there's equality in the workplace, written equality in law, but if you don't practice it because your culture is still backward, then there is a problem. So as a society, we must make sure that all the laws that we have are implemented properly by changing mindsets.
Violence against women is a grave violation of human rights, and we as a society should work towards eliminating all forms of discrimination towards women. That's it for this episode. Stay tuned for the final episode of The Society with Farhana, where we'll dissect and find solutions to the problem of violence against children.